welcome back to the Outer Space Gamers. Today we are bringing you the first ever Outer Space podcast. During this discussion, we will be talking about our experiences with video games and movies alike. So with that, let's get started. Alright Tim, first video's out, and we have a second one coming, so we needed something to fill in the days before that comes, so I thought we would do, maybe a podcast and get a few discussions up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's good, and I know when we first started talking about our YouTube channels, first started talking about Outer Space Gamers, that was a point in our friendship and everything where I had showed you 2001: Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, and kind of a lot of the philosophy and thinking for the channel, like what we wanted to do, why we wanted to do it, came from watching that film together and everything. And so I know like one of the first topics we wanted to talk about in the first podcast that we were going to be doing would be 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I remember when you showed me that movie, it kind of, like, it
triggered
was
you?
Yeah, it triggered me, hence Trigger Productions, but it's also a film that I also thought, when I heard about it on YouTube, when I would watch videos that, like, had a bunch of movies in it together, and it said 2001: Space Odyssey, I thought it was a movie that was actually made in 2001, and then the title of the movie was Space Odyssey. So I was very, very surprised when you brought it up, and it was made in 1968, and one of the really fascinating things in my mind when I was watching it was that I couldn't believe that in 1968, which was far off from Star Wars, they were able to recreate sort of like a Star Wars atmosphere so much earlier. And I think you just see a lot of the techniques that Star Wars uses which is very, very popular today, is used from 2001: Space Odyssey.
Well, and I'll put a quick plug in for our conspiracy theorists, but even, obviously, I think from a special effects, from a visual effects standpoint, film was groundbreaking. It's considered one of the penultimate science fiction films of its time, of time in general, I would say, by the master himself, Stanley Kubrick. But one of the things for, again, our conspiracy friends that might be subscribing or viewing our videos is that for many people, they feel that Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing. He was the one behind, and his movie, The Shining, was like his apology to the American people. Because we're not going to spend our time with conspiracy theories today. Sorry, our other friends in Restless Life who find Sasquatch or find those conspiracy theories and everything. But one of the things is that, with the quality and that realism that was displayed in the film, I think it's groundbreaking to the fact that people thought they were there, or again that presence of mind of saying, wow, this is space. And instead of now from Hubble, from different things that going through Jupiter, we just got images back from that this past week and weeks. These are all imagined from what people what Stanley Kubrick envisioned, what his production team envisioned. But yeah, a stark reality of this is space.
Another thing that really helped with the reality aspect was the fact that the music and the atmosphere that would have been, we watched it in your room, so we didn't get surround sound, but we were still able to if I thought to be back in when it was first premiering in a movie theater, there are just some points in the movie where it's just strict breathing. It's just the sort of a Darth Vader type inhale, exhale, and it lasts for probably 10 to 15 minutes, and some of those scenes, and it's very, it's scary because you're getting that feel where you're in space and it's just you, if you mess one thing up, you're done. And it's not even supposed to be a horror film, but it's in some points of the movie when you're feeling nervous for the characters when they're working on the space station, you can feel it. You can feel you want to be there. If you were there, you'd be they were very calm in it, but you'd be probably freaking out. And it really captured, I think, the realism of it, and the fact that what could be there, people would feel they were on the moon. That's what Armstrong felt when he set foot on the moon.
Yeah. So. Well, and I think kind of going off a couple of things that, just sparked, in my mind from what you were just talking about was one, obviously the music, and then the essence of pop culture from this film. And so, to kind of touch on the music, I think one of the great pieces of this film is that it uses classical music, you
Yes.
know, Richard Strauss, Sprach Zarathustra, Baloo Danube, like, you know, different pieces of classical literature in the musical realm that, you know, are profoundly impacting like the visual choreography, like the play of the images with the score throughout the film. Almost, you know, and we made reference to this a little bit in our first YouTube release game review, you know, with the concept that Disney used, you know, similar kind of music throughout his films, you know, one of them being Fantasia, where, you know, one of the things that I think, you know, almost like put that film at a disadvantage some ways, or like the critical release of it, is that, you know, it was very long, one, and then it kind of brought music that people really had forgotten about, or maybe not forgotten about, but forgot was a fabric, part of the fabric of our culture. So like this movie really utilizes it in a way from the timpanis and the scores at the different stages of like the evolution of like, you know, man from ape to star child, but then kind of going back into like the music not only, but then like the iconography and the visuals, is that how important this has been in pop culture today. Brought up Star Wars, like that's rife in our pop culture and everything. You brought up In Space No One Hears You Scream, like the Alien reference, you know, Interstellar, you know, a more recent science fiction film, you know, Alien Covenant coming out this summer, you know, as a continuation in the Alien franchise. The essence of pop culture from this film, you know, with HAL, the computer, you know, and our reference to, you know, modern day technology kind of overgrowing, you know, even our own mind capacity, you know, to the music, Open the Pod Bay Doors, how like some of the famous movie quotes or like the images, you know, people don't realize that it's from this film. Like I know for you, like,
I
you know,
had no idea it was from this film. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And then when I watched it, I was like, oh man, that's this movie.
Yep.
And it was very fun to see it play out, because it, like, the second act is very, very well done, and it captures kind of a more technological kind of advancement that we could get to very, very soon, where a computer can run just as much as a human and maybe even have artificial emotions, and that's what HAL was programmed to have, in a sense. Mm-hmm. You think, because like I said, I felt sorry for him because they kind of treated him like dirt, and they went the two space guys. They just went on we're gonna unplug him, and like he was like no, but like at the same time he was also programmed to carry out the mission, and so he was trying to carry out the mission. But it was kind of like Frankenstein, where Frankenstein was created, but then not loved for, and I feel like that was kind of an illusion that maybe Stanley was using when they created HAL, because like I don't know if you felt sympathy for him, but I sure did, because I felt bad.
Well, I think there's like that piece of, with some different conversations that I've been a part of the past couple of days, you know, the concept of like language, or like the use of language, you know, as a division or as like a separating or a uniting tool and everything. And I remember like the one clear scene in the movie where they go into one of the pods, space pods, to, you know, go do work outside of the spacecraft, and they turn it and then they shut the sound off, so then HAL can't hear them.
Yeah.
But then you realize this stark reality that like, oh crap, like this robot, this computer has almost this omnipresence where it can lip read. Yeah. And it can understand exactly what they're trying to do, plot, you know, their own plot its despise. But then also at the same time, then like later on in the film, spoiler alert, you know, HAL, you know, kills one of the astronauts, and then the astronaut does the same to it and everything, where it kind of reveals its, you know, that primary mission of like that they've all been cogs in a wheel to something greater, you know. And so I kind of like in the next phase of 2001: A Space Odyssey, kind of want to reference the first sentence in its review and the 5th anniversary edition of 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And the first line is, "An artifact of evidently extraterrestrial origin triggers and monitors key stages on man's journey from ape to star child." And that whole concept of like the monolith, you know, plays importantly throughout the entire film, you know, where the movie is based off of the screenplay that Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke wrote. But then from back, even before that, Arthur C. Clarke wrote the book The Sentinel, you know, in reference to like the monolith, you know, that piece of history, whether that's extraterrestrial, human, but an artifact that triggers different events, you know, in our human experience to then build from, okay, ape, the evolution of like, oh, if I use like, one of the bones from an animal, then I can win back something or take something back and fight for it or use it as a tool. And then that shifts into like, the tools of man, getting to, the moon and finding something again there that then triggers, the journey to Jupiter. And so that was something that like is extremely profound. And I guess like this leads me into like the ending of the film that we've talked about, before, where you have that, and harken back to our Triggered Productions logo, where we got it from the kind of going beyond visible light and having that experience, beyond like what we could imagine, feel, or experience.
The last scene's so hard to kind of understand. I mean, it's like, I think we looked up what it was, and like the producers wanted it to be, what do you think it's going to be? Like, they never said a definitive answer of what the ending does mean, and I don't want to go into many spoilers because I think everybody should be able to watch and experience it, but like it tackles the science. I think the ending's more science. Like, it tackles like a concept where certain time period, but then you're like, you can see the future, but the future can't see you, but the future could hear it, or like has like knows that you're there. When the astronaut that goes through that experience sees his future self, the future self, like you get the visual of the past self looking at the future self, and the future self hears him, but as he turns, the past self's not there anymore. So it's really tackling the concept between time and, I guess, like space, but like going, like there's infinite possibilities, and I think that's my interpretation of the thing, is that like we're just so small in this terms of space, in terms of the universes and everything that's out there. We're like, there could be an exact planet that is the opposite of us, where we're still there, but we're like the opposite people. It's like anything's possible. I think that's what it was trying to get at. Like.
Yeah, and I would like, kind of echo, as we kind of wrap up our discussion on 2001, I think to echo that, I think it's that self-awareness that humans, have, in the sense of like, out of what separates us from our animal counterparts is the knowledge of our own mortality, like the knowledge of like that's going to happen, like as soon as we're born, and we have some self-realization like that, we learn that we will die eventually, that we're not eternal beings or temporal, in the concept that we've seen our evolution thus far, but what's the next part in that, like evolution, and like in 2001 it presents the concept of like a rebirth, sort of like a higher level, like a phoenix, the star child as it's referenced in the movie, but that kind of like next level of evolution, or like mind space, and is that in these like human forms, is it something more, is it the concept of eternity, where that is. But I think like this movie does it really well to, Stanley Kubrick allows you to think about it for yourself, like never give a full answer of like, no, I don't want you to know my opinion because I want yours is probably going to be greater because of the imagination of it, and something that, maybe we touch on another podcast is like the science fiction film by Spielberg, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, I love that.
Again, a great musical piece, but a great science fiction film. But the one thing that the studio made him do for the theatrical cut originally was show the inside of the spaceship, and Spielberg never wanted to do it. He said I can create something, but the audience's imagination is going to be will far exceed any of the things that I can do. And so in his director's cut, he removes that and just allows you to think what Richard Dreyfuss's character is going to see, and takes that maybe forced image, that is put into the film by the studio or producers, and says, no, like the audience is going to be even more imaginative than I could ever be, because of collective thought, of the individual, perspective, that allows them to even grow further.
All right. Before we wrap this up, what is your favorite scene?
Favorite scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey? That's a good question. I would say probably something with the two main astronauts and Hal, and just what could be seen as a very mundane conversation, but to see the facial images of the astronauts, and what they're processing subconsciously, and then Hal's monotonous And ultimately, like, you know, to find out that, you know, he has a killer instinct, but it's not the same driving force, I would say, that, you know, a human killer instinct would be. So, like, that scene, and then probably the second time you see the monolith, you know, on the moon. And just, like, the walking down of the ramp to that, like, the score probably would be my two favorite scenes from the film.
So if you haven't seen 2001 Space Odyssey, I hope we gave you kind of like a synopsis. Not a full synopsis. The movie's pretty lengthy, so we did not cover all the parts, but I would highly recommend to watch it or watch it with another person so you can kind of relay the information back and forth like me and Tim did, because that was really useful for me to kind of understand what is happening, because it is a like more mature movie. Like you have to have the mindset to watch it.
And I would definitely say, you know, as Joe said, you know, make sure that, you know, you watch it a couple of times, you pick something up every time, and then I would say, you know, if you can get your hands on a Blu-ray copy, if you have surround sound, plug that, you know, baby in, and let the sound, you know, encompass you, even though there's going to be like a 10-minute intro or intermission of just black space on the screen and then the music. It pissed Joe off, something first, but I would say it's an experience, and that sets you up for each act of the film.
Better than Star Wars.
It all depends on your preference.
Just kidding. I don't like the first three.
May the six be with you. So.
Yeah, may the six be with you.
Thanks for listening, Space Cadets, to the first part of our first ever podcast with Outer Space Gamers. Just listen to the review of our 2001 A Space Odyssey take. And coming up soon, there'll be a second part to this podcast featuring a recap of our most recent video game review over Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. The third and final part of this first ever podcast will be where Octopus takes over and reviews the Nintendo Switch. Thanks for subscribing. Please like, subscribe, and comment below. Let us know what you would like to see as future subjects for our future podcast coming up. And then also please check out our first ever video game review and the first piece of our YouTube channel for Outer Space Gamers. Thanks for subscribing, Space Cadets. We'll see you soon. Over and out.